This will be Manning. Back to throw. Across the middle. Pass complete. Ball down at the 35, to the 40, to the 45, to the 50, to the 45, to the 40, to the 35, 30, 25, 20, 15, 10, 5. What did he do? All he did was score. Joey Kent. Touchdown on play number 1.
You're listening to the RTI Podcast, powered by RockyTopInsider.com.
Welcome into the Rocky Top Insider Podcast. I am Ben McKee, your host here on the podcast. And boy, do we have a lot to talk about on this edition of the RTI Podcast. A big matchup for the Tennessee Volunteers this weekend down in Athens, Georgia. The 14th ranked Volunteers will be in Athens to take on number 3 Georgia at 3:30 p.m. Eastern on CBS. And what an opportunity for this Tennessee football program. And I am thrilled and excited to dive into this matchup and talk about this football game. And joining me on this edition of the RTI Podcast is the one, the only, Bradley Matthews. Brad, how are you on this Thursday afternoon as the Atlanta Braves get ready to sweep the Miami Marlins?
I'm doing well, Ben. It'll be an even better day if we can get that sweep, but really looking forward to this football game. It's a huge one, not only for the Tennessee football program, but Jeremy Pruitt as well.
Absolutely. And before we dive into the Georgia game, I want to revisit the Missouri game. And get your thoughts on Tennessee's win, 35-12 win over Missouri. What did you think of Tennessee's offensive performance? What did you think of Tennessee's defensive performance?
I mean, I think once again, it was overall a take care of business type of game. When you look at what Missouri has, first-year coach in Drinkowitz, I think Tennessee didn't have to show much, very vanilla offensively, because they could be, and they want to keep as much up their sleeve moving forward into Georgia, Alabama, Kentucky, the bigger opponents coming up on this schedule. And so it was more of a take care of business. Bland, vanilla, but took care of the football offensively. And defense, I mean, there was a few holes. I think we can definitely be better up front, but we also saw in the secondary limited action by some of our premier guys like Bryce Thompson, who was only playing on third down. Still no Sean Schamberger, which will change this week, thankfully. And so about what I expected, to be honest with you, I wasn't necessarily thinking this would be a close game. Tennessee should have came in there taking care of business. It may not be a huge blowout, but it didn't have to be because of the mindset and the game plan going in. Tennessee was just going to run it down their throats, make the plays happen in the pass game and protect the football.
Yeah, it was a quality win against an SEC opponent on Saturday. And in a COVID year, I think that's about all you can ask for. I don't think that you can really nitpick a win this particular season. You can, obviously. I think you look silly nitpicking a win. Obviously, there are things to improve on moving forward, but at the end of the day, you're just thrilled for a win. And really the first big win over an SEC team from start to finish. You probably have to go back to the 2016 season and find a game that season. Obviously, there wasn't one in 2017, 2018. Even in the Auburn win, Auburn jumped out on Tennessee early. They did lead Kentucky from start to finish. So I guess you could point that game out. The 2018 Kentucky team that won 10 games and won, I forget which bowl it was. It was the New Year's Six Bowl, but beat Penn State to win its 10th game of the year with Benny Snell. Tennessee dominated Kentucky that year because, of course, Kentucky is Kentucky, and even in the greatest year in Kentucky football history, they still can't beat Tennessee. And then last year, there wasn't really a game where Tennessee just dominated from start to finish, an SEC game, that is. You look at the South Carolina game, it was 40-something to 20-something. But even in that, South Carolina scored on the first play of the game. So just a good step in the right direction, because Tennessee the previous couple of seasons have struggled to pull out those wins over Missouri and Vanderbilt and Kentucky here and there. And so it's nice to see Tennessee taking a step in that department of beating down on the teams that they should beat down, because that Missouri football team is not good. I'll take Nick Bolton on my football team every single day. I'll take Larry Roundtree on my football team every single day. But outside of that, Missouri is not good. So, again, there are some things you need to improve on moving forward, but you have to be pleased with the offensive line and the running game. Cade Mays gets his first career start at right tackle next to Jerome Carvin and Brandon Kennedy, Trey Smith, and Wanye Morris, obviously. But you have to be pleased with the big uglies moving forward. And my point on the Swain event this week has been everybody talks about Cade Mays and Trey Smith and Wanye Morris and Brandon Kennedy, the starting five. But I think I counted it up today, and Tennessee can go 11 deep on the offensive line if it needed to. There are 11 guys that Tennessee can put into the game. Obviously, if you go from Trey Smith to Javonte Spraggins, there's going to be a little bit of a drop-off there. But Javonte Spraggins can still get the job done even as a true freshman. So you look at Riley Locklear, you look at Kayron Calvert, Darnell Wright, Jerome Carvin, Cooper Mays, Javonte Spraggins. This offensive line is so deep, Brad, and this should give Tennessee fans hope for what this season can be, but also the future of Tennessee football, because as Jeremy Pruitt has said so many times during his career here or his short tenure, it's a line of scrimmage league. And right now, offensively, Tennessee is set up to win the line of scrimmage for this year and many years to come.
Yeah, absolutely. And not only do you have the ability to go deep, 9, 10, 11 deep, but a lot of these guys are versatile. They can play numerous positions on that line. They cross-train them, which is great. And the young talent, and what we've seen out of Spraggins here early, getting meaningful snaps early in this season, and he's just a young pup. He's a big one, but he's just a young pup still. So, yes, great points. Offensive line, it's still kind of shocking because Tennessee hasn't had this in several years because – I mean, we've had flashes in the pan with one or two on the same starting five, but not the starting five of this magnitude with the NFL potential and the depth in 5-6 years.
Yeah, and with this year being a COVID year, and Lord knows what's going to pop up the week of the Arkansas game, the week of the Alabama game, Auburn, A&M towards the end of the season, Florida the last week of the season. Lord knows what obstacles may pop up. And so for that versatility that you spoke about to be such a big advantage for Tennessee could really show towards the end of the season. So I was very happy with Tennessee's offensive performance. Obviously, the offensive line made Eric Gray and Ty Chandler look really good, but Ty Chandler and Eric Gray, even behind a great offensive line, looked good themselves. You saw Ty Chandler really finish some runs with physicality. You saw Eric Gray break some ankles. There are still ankles on Neyland Stadium's field as we speak right now because of what Eric Gray did to some poor Missouri defenders. So the running game was tremendous, and I thought Jared Garantano played pretty good football. He wasn't great. 14 of 23 is what I believe he finished, 190 yards and a touchdown, but he wasn't asked to do a ton. And that is the Jared Garantano that Tennessee needs to show up each and every week. They're not going to ask him to be Joe Burrow or Tua Tagovailoa or Trevor Lawrence or Justin Fields and put the team on his back. He just needs to be somebody that can benefit from the running game, that can feed off the running game and be really good in play action and take advantage of a loaded box. If it's a pass play going up against a loaded box, be efficient in the RPO game. That's one major change to the offense that we've seen this year. Analytically speaking, JG was I believe the least used quarterback in the SEC last season from an RPO perspective, and through 2 games this season, he's one of the more used quarterbacks in the SEC from an RPO perspective. So JG just needs to stay within himself, and I thought he did a great job of that against Missouri and delivered 2 beautiful footballs, one to Jalen Hyatt and one to Brandon Johnson. So that gives you confidence that he can potentially get the job done moving forward with Georgia and Alabama in 2 out of the next 3 games that you play.
Yeah, absolutely. JG had some dimes dropping out of his pocket last week against Missouri. And I think you are correct, especially when it comes to like games like Missouri, South Carolina, Kentucky, Vanderbilt, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, any teams of that caliber. Yes, be a game manager, play within yourself. Don't get too risky, especially on the perimeter. But when it comes to games like Georgia, Florida, Alabama, he's going to have to do more than what he has been doing. They're going to ask him to do more. And can he still manage the game, protect the football while he's being asked to, complete those more difficult throws, those more diverse packages, going through 3-4 progressions whenever you have multiple options out there? Can he do that when the pressure's on against these high profile teams? He's going to have to make some of those throws. In addition to the couple dimes he had in Missouri, he's going to have to make some more against teams like Georgia, just expecting that the running game is going to handle their business and the defense is going to be able to keep you in it. He'll have to be a little bit better this week.
And we'll dive into that as we move on to the podcast. But just to somewhat piggyback off of what you were talking about, him needing to do more, I think he's proven that he can beat the Missouris, South Carolinas, the Kentuckys, the Vanderbilts, those level teams, those mid-tier to bottom feeder teams in the SEC. Jarrett Guarantano is a more than capable quarterback when facing those teams. I would imagine if you went back and looked at his record against those level teams, I imagine it would be a high winning percentage. Now, when you throw in the big fishies into that record, not the same situation. Again, we'll talk about that when we really dive into the Georgia game. But if you don't believe that Jarrett Guarantano has improved from last season to this season, then I can't help you. You simply don't like the name Guarantano. You're tired of seeing number 2 at quarterback. And look, I get it. I get the JG fatigue, but he's the quarterback of the now and possibly next year. I know fans don't want to hear that. And again, I completely understand. But Harrison Bailey, not ready to play and probably won't be ready to play by next season either. Brian Maurer, same boat, has a lot of maturing to do. JT Shrout is a solid option, I think, if something were to happen to JG. But I don't think he's a quarterback that is going to push you over the edge. From my perspective, the future of the Tennessee quarterback position is my eggs are in the basket of Caden Salter and Ty Simpson moving forward. And I think JG just needs to be a good bridge until Caden Salter, Ty Simpson, or if Brian Maurer and Harrison Bailey can step up and be ready before those 2 other ones that aren't on campus yet. So I get the JG fatigue, but it looks like he's the quarterback of the now and potentially next season as well. So, and I think there are some positives to take from that. I don't think it's all negative despite the JG fatigue, because again, if you can't see the improvements from last year to this year, I can't help you. I truly can't, because he has improved. Has he improved enough to beat the Georgias, the Alabamas, the Floridas? I would say no. I think he's a guy that you have to really build an offense around in order to beat the Alabama, Georgia, and Florida, such as the offensive line that Tennessee has built and the running backs that Tennessee has placed in the offense.
Yeah, so we'll find out Saturday.
We will. And the last thing I'll say, and I'll turn it back over to you, Bradley, is I want to talk about the areas of improvement. I don't want to say, oh, if you can't see the improvements from last year to this year with JG and not give examples and not show my work. The big frustrations with JG last year were missing wide open receivers, not getting the ball out on time, holding on to the ball too long and not having good pocket presence, and turning the football over. And turning the football over was a surprise last season, because in 2018, he did a good job of taking care of the football, only had 3 interceptions, comes back last year and turns the football over 8 different times. via interception. So he's corrected that through 2 games. He's yet to miss a wide open receiver, not in terms of an incomplete pass to the receiver, but you go back and you look at the BYU game, Jawan Jennings, Marquez Callaway, they're running wide open down the middle of the field, and JG doesn't even see them. Through 2 games, you haven't seen that just yet. And he's also done a good job of going through his progressions, making sure Tennessee is in the correct plays. An underrated part of his game, making sure Tennessee is in the correct running plays. That was something that frustrated coaches last year. So I do think you've seen an improvement from last year to this year, and we'll see how much he has improved this Saturday against Georgia.
Yeah. I mean, there's the obvious JG fatigue, and some of it is not really deserved. You're just going to have that part of the fan base, especially in the SEC. But he's your best option right now, folks. And to be honest with you, and this isn't on you, this isn't on anybody else, but I'm getting tired of talking about it because I think it's so clear as day that he is our best option, and he has been making progressions and making a lot of improvements, even in the latter stages of his career. So you have to give him credit where it's due. He's not double clutching as much. Some people were calling it pump fakes last year. Why is he pump faking so much? No, he was just indecisive, and he wanted to see that man open, whoever it was, for numerous seconds before he let the ball rip, and not right out of the break when he's supposed to let it rip. And so we've seen those progressions, but this is going to be a very pivotal game, especially with how that narrative is going to progress moving forward throughout the rest of the season. This is a very pivotal game for Jarrett Garantano moving forward. But yes, I do agree. I don't want to speak too much to next year moving forward. I mean, Harrison Bailey, Brian Maurer, even JT Stroud, they could come out of nowhere. They buy in maybe more so than they currently are to Jim Chaney's system. They put in extra work that they haven't in the offseason, and they come out of nowhere. That could definitely happen. But right now, you are correct. JG's the guy, and everybody else just needs to deal with it. Enjoy the football that we have an opportunity to watch right now, especially before, we get into the latter stages of fall and early winter where COVID could really go nuts, and we may not even be able to finish the season. So quit ragging on number 2 and just enjoy the ball game, because he's playing pretty damn good right now.
Yeah, and that's my thing is it's okay to get on to JG when he deserves to be gotten on to. But through 2 games, he's played good football, and I think that's all you can ask from him at this point in his career. Did not mean to go down the JG rabbit hole, but obviously he is a big piece of Tennessee football, and he's going to play a pivotal role in whether or not Tennessee can upset Georgia this weekend. He is the X factor, whether we like it or not. If he performs well, Tennessee will have a chance to win in the fourth quarter. If he doesn't perform well, Tennessee's not going to upset Georgia. It's truly as simple as that. And he's the X factor because, yes, Tennessee's offensive line is great. Yes, Tennessee has a really good running game, but JG is going to have to make throws and make plays himself in order to push Tennessee over the edge. The offensive line can only get him so far. And this is how it is for every good quarterback in big-time football games. They make plays to help their teams win football games. So we'll see if that happens this weekend. Wrapping up the Missouri game, I know we went down the JG rabbit hole, and I apologize for that. I'll take the blame for that. What did you think of Tennessee's defensive performance? I, for one, was not a fan, even though Tennessee only allowed 12 points. I thought that was a little misleading. You hold Missouri to 2 field goals, 1 touchdown, and Theo Jackson saved another touchdown because Missouri was on the verge of scoring early in the fourth quarter to cut that to a 1-score game before Theo Jackson picked off that interception, or picked off that pass, rather.
And you also didn't see a lot of the dynamic blitz packages that Jeremy Pruitt likes to throw in there. I mean, it was a lot of basic coverages. You didn't have, some of your best cover options, and Bryce Thompson, Sean Schamberger out there for the majority of the game, at least for Bryce Thompson, and Sean Schamberger missed the entirety of that first game and second game. So I wasn't necessarily expecting, stonewall, shut them up, no points, little points, just a couple of field goals. I wasn't necessarily expecting that, even though it was Missouri, because I'm truly buying into, and from everything I've known and watched on tape, watching these games numerous times, we didn't really dip into the playbook a lot. And you hear that a lot, but we didn't have to these first two games. And that's Jeremy Pruitt really scheming up for the schedule that's upcoming, starting with Georgia on Saturday.
Yeah, and I say that I wasn't pleased with the performance because of who Tennessee was playing.
Yeah.
I said earlier, I like Larry Roundtree. In fact, I love Larry Roundtree. I think he's going to play in the NFL. I think he is a tremendous running back, but he's it. He's all that Missouri has. Missouri's quarterback is not somebody who should have thrown for over 200 yards, especially after he did not even play in the first quarter. The offensive line for Missouri is not good, and Tennessee got very little push. And then, Tennessee's secondary, they were good in coverage, but there were far too many miscommunications. That's what bugged me about the secondary. And as you just mentioned, they did not have their starting five that you expected to have before the season in that game. You didn't have it against South Carolina either. So I do think there are reasons, not excuses, but reasons as to why the secondary wasn't as sharp as maybe it should have been against an inferior opponent. So that's why I was not a fan of the defensive performance, just because of who they were playing. Missouri's offense is not good outside of Larry Roundtree, and I was not happy with the lack of push that Tennessee generated up front along the defensive line, and the miscommunications more so than anything in the secondary. Because even though you're without Bryce Thompson on first and second down, he only played on third down because he suffered an injury on Tuesday of that week and limited him in how much he could play against Missouri. You were also without Sean Schamberger. You had guys in the game that played last year, and miscommunications should not be happening. So that's why I was frustrated with the defense, because I'm looking forward when I evaluate the past two performances. I'm looking forward to Georgia. I'm looking forward to Alabama, Florida, Auburn, A&M. Those miscommunication errors, the lack of push against a bad offensive line will get you beat by double digits against some of the teams coming up on the schedule. So that's why I was frustrated with the performance. And it's still early. You'll have your five back this weekend, so hopefully that truly pays a big difference. Moving into that big game this weekend, we talk about it being a big opportunity right off the top of the podcast. And off the field, it's a big opportunity because all recruits will be watching on Saturday. And there are four particular ones that come to mind. Amarius Mims, the big five-star offensive lineman from Georgia, he's announcing this coming Wednesday between Tennessee and Georgia. He was in Knoxville this past weekend for the Tennessee-Missouri game. He will be in Athens this weekend for the Tennessee-Georgia game. This game could obviously sway Amarius Mims one way or the other. I think he is waiting to see that Tennessee is truly on the road to being successful, and that he's not just being sold a bill of goods. He wants to see the proof in the pudding, and this is an opportunity for Tennessee to do that. But also Terrion Ingram-Dawkins, the four-star defensive lineman from South Carolina, he will be in attendance this weekend. Georgia and Tennessee are two of the favorites for him. You look at Nyland Green, the four-star corner from Georgia. Tennessee-Georgia battle for him as well. Smile Munden, Georgia native, five-star linebacker. Tennessee is trying to keep up in his sweepstakes. And Smile Munden, Nyland Green, Amarius Mims, they all spoke with 247 this week and mentioned that the outcome of Saturday's game will not, make them pick Tennessee or not pick Tennessee, but it will definitely have an impact one way or the other. If Tennessee comes out and gets embarrassed, it's going to be really hard to make up for that performance in recruiting, that is. And
that's the recruits being knowledgeable. I mean, you look at the last three matchups, Georgia's outscored Tennessee, not only won the last three matchups, but outscored Tennessee 122-26. Last year wasn't even close, 43-14. I mean, Tennessee needs to at least be in this game, and they don't necessarily may have to win it. But if they're in this game and they're taking it to Georgia and they're in it in the fourth quarter, this is going to make an impression on all of these recruits. Do they all pick Tennessee? Do they all pick Georgia? Who knows? But that's what they're probably looking for out of this Jeremy Pruitt football team.
Yep, they want to see that what they're being told isn't just talk in recruiting. So it's a big opportunity for Tennessee in so many ways. And I'll hand it over to you on this point, Brad. I think it's a big opportunity for Jeremy Pruitt to announce himself to the SEC. Everybody knows he's an SEC football coach. Everybody knows that, okay, Jeremy Pruitt maybe has a little something going on over on Rocky Top. This is a chance for him to 1,000% announce himself to the SEC, and in my opinion, I'll take it a step further, announce himself to college football.
Yeah. And people are asking nationally, is this the measuring stick game for Jeremy Pruitt and his tenure at Tennessee? I don't think it's maybe the measuring stick, but it's definitely and probably the biggest measuring stick to this point in his career. You consider everything that he took over, and we're not going to go into the details, but he takes over a mess. He's a first-year coach or first-year head coach at this level, and you're going up against some very talented East contenders in your very first year. You're having to rebuild both lines of scrimmage, and you're flipping around on your offensive coordinator for the first few years. So I think people nationally even already considering, hey, Jeremy Pruitt, he's got a little something working in Knoxville, but the way they play, and even if they can topple Georgia this weekend, that's really going to get a lot of folks' attention, not just recruits, but what is Jeremy Pruitt got going on here? Is this going to be a flash in the pan, or can he continue this as they win their 9th straight? Can they move it forward as they hit the thickness of the schedule?
Yeah, I completely agree. This is the biggest game of Jeremy Pruitt's short tenure to this point. It truly is. This would be a great measuring stick for the program to see how far Tennessee is from Florida and Georgia, or to see if Tennessee is up there with Florida and Georgia. I'm pumped to see where Tennessee stands following this football game. Will be fun to talk about afterwards. Hopefully fun to talk about afterwards. But when you look at this game, Brad, number 14 Tennessee, number 3 Georgia, prime time on CBS. We'll start on the offensive side of the ball for Tennessee. Tennessee's offense versus Georgia's defense. What gives you confidence that Tennessee can be successful there? What concerns you that Georgia's defense may be able to stifle Tennessee?
Starting with my concerns, even though it's only 2 games in, Georgia's played, some decent competition, and they rank first in total defense, rush defense, pass defense. I mean, they're allowing 58 yards per game on the ground. That's got to be Tennessee's bread and butter. They're definitely going to have to surpass that number to be in the football game against Georgia. They haven't allowed a single rush, Ben, over 20 yards this year. They've only allowed 4 rushes in 2 games over 10 yards. That ranks first in the SEC. Only allowed 496 total yards in these first 2 games. The next closest team in the SEC is over 700 yards. So this defense is no joke. And they've got athletes up, and down, first level, second level, and in the secondary. So Tennessee's going to have to play a very sharp game. They're going to have to execute and protect the football, but they are also going to have to make big plays. They're going to have to make big plays in the air. I say that because we have to assume and expect that the running game is going to be at least a factor. You have to surpass this 58 yards per game. You got to get probably 120, 125 total rushing in this game to at least be competitive. And I think Jarrett Garantano is going to have to make a lot of plays, probably the majority of the plays in the air, because if there is a weakness in this on this defense, I think it's in the secondary, but it's hard to even call it a weakness, Ben.
Yeah, it's not a true weakness just because not the most talented spot on the defense doesn't mean it's a weakness, because I truly don't believe that there is a weakness with this Georgia defense. There is a weakness with the Georgia offense, but I don't see a weakness with this Georgia defense entering the game. They have the talent, they have the depth, they have the experience. It's going to be a tall task for Tennessee's offense. And what gives me confidence in regards to Tennessee finding offensive success also concerns me. I have confidence in Tennessee's offensive line. I truly do. I think it is the second best offensive line in the SEC behind Alabama. But what concerns me is that as good as Tennessee's offensive line is, Georgia's defensive line may just be better. Georgia's defensive line has numerous NFL defensive linemen. Jordan Davis at nose tackle will be a handful for Trey Smith, Jerome Carvin, and Brandon Kennedy. And you say, okay, well, let's double team Jordan Davis. Well, then you're leaving Devontae Wyatt or Julian Rochester out on the island alone with Wanye Morris, which Wanye may be able to handle. You just don't know right now. And on the opposite side of Jordan Davis, you have Malik Herring, Trayvon Walker. If you double team the interior, then he's out on an island with Cade Mays. And again, you trust Cade Mays to get the job done. But even if Tennessee handles the down linemen, then you look at the edge rushers, Azeez Ojulari, Jermaine Johnson, Nolan Smith, Adam Anderson. Those are all guys. I just named 4 guys that are going to be playing in the NFL on top of the defensive linemen that I mentioned. So Tennessee's offensive line, I have confidence in them, but I'm also slightly concerned that as good as they are, Georgia's defensive front just may simply be better. Tennessee is going to have to win their individual matchups up front along the offensive line to create some holes in the running game for Ty Chandler and Eric Gray, and then obviously give time to JG to get the football out. And the other thing I'm concerned about when facing Georgia's defense, and this is something that Jeremy Pruitt talked about on Wednesday, I believe it was, but Jeremy Pruitt was not a fan of the receiver play. He wasn't upset with the receiver play. He thought that they could have done more, is the best way to put it. He was not a fan of the separation that was created, or the lack of separation that was created between Tennessee's receivers and Missouri's defensive backs. And you talked about this a moment ago, Brad. Georgia's secondary is absolutely loaded. Tyson Campbell, starter.
Going to be a first-round pick if he keeps playing like this.
For sure. His backup, DJ Daniel, NFL draft pick. The opposite corner, Eric Stokes, NFL draft pick. You look at star nickel position, Mark Webb, Tyreek Stevenson, draft pick. You look at the safety position, Richard LeCount, senior, draft pick. Lewis Kine, draft pick. I mean, that's 7-8 guys that are getting drafted just in the secondary alone. So I am a little bit concerned about Tennessee's receivers getting open so JG can get them the football as well.
Yeah, and I think it's Jeremy Pruitt just being concerned, honestly, because if you're not going to be able to separate from Missouri DBs, you're not going to be able to separate from Georgia DBs. And they're going to press you all day long until you prove that you can get away from it and then burn them with the speed. Tennessee's going to have to be able to find open space, and it's not just going to be these swing passes and quick hitters out to the flats. That's not how you beat Georgia.
Now, looking to the opposite side of the ball, I want to
final note on the offense.
Go ahead.
You got to convert on third down. You rank 13th out of 14 teams in the SEC on third down conversion. Georgia, I mean, they're second in opponent third down conversions. So they're one of the best in the SEC. You've got to be able to counteract and gain the needed yardage on third down. But what makes that more manageable is getting yards on first and second, obviously. You got to make it a third and medium. These third and longs got to stay out of them to have a chance.
Completely agree. That is a great point by you. Tennessee was better against Missouri. I believe they finished 6 of 14, 6 of 15. So we're definitely better on third down. I was pleased with Tennessee's situational football against Missouri. 4-4 on fourth down. JG was 6 of 7 for 86 yards and a touchdown, I believe, on third down, throwing the football somewhere in that ballpark. Very efficient on third down, very good on third down. Tennessee was good as a team on third down as well, as you just illustrated. So I was very pleased with Tennessee's situational football on offense against Missouri. Let's see if they can carry that over to Georgia, because that will be a critical element to beating Georgia for sure. Great point by you, something that I also had in the back of my mind as well. Now, looking to the other matchup, which is Georgia's offense versus Tennessee's defense. The concern is Tennessee's defensive line going up against Georgia's offensive line. That is a huge concern. I've talked about it ad nauseum on the Swain event here on the podcast for the last couple of weeks. I don't want to spend any more time talking about the negativity on the defensive side of the ball. But that is a huge concern for me going into this football game, because Georgia's offensive line is very talented. Now, Georgia's offense has a ton of talent, but their weakness, in my opinion, is their lack of inexperience. And I think that could get them into trouble, especially going up against Jeremy Pruitt, who, as Cole Kublik said on the Swain event on Tuesday, is, in his opinion, the best in-game defensive mind in college football. And that is quite the statement. And who knows if Cole Kublik is right or wrong. That's a hard statement to quantify. That's an opinion, obviously. But even if he's not the best, he is without a doubt one of the best at minimum. There's no question about it, no bones about it. So an inexperienced Georgia offense going up against a Jeremy Pruitt coached defense and Derek Ansley, I think could create some problems for Georgia. I really trust Jeremy Pruitt in this situation. You look at the offensive line, very talented, but again, a lot of new faces. George Pickens is really the only established receiver Georgia has. Kieras Jackson in the slot is really starting to come on. So it looks like Georgia actually may have a number 2 receiver that we did not see during the preseason. At quarterback, you have Stetson Bennett. We'll see if he can make the throws. He reminds me of Devlin Duck Hodges for the Pittsburgh Steelers last year. His teammates love him because he's the ultimate underdog story. He's a great teammate, a great guy, plays hard, won't get you beat in terms of he won't turn the football over, won't make bad decisions, but he also doesn't have the arm or the stature at 5'10", 190 pounds to truly beat you. So I think that could work in Tennessee's favor as well. Obviously, Georgia has good tailbacks, Zamir White, James Cook. So can Tennessee generate enough up front to disrupt a quarterback that probably doesn't have the arm that can just simply beat you, even when maybe you're in the right position to beat him?
Pressure. Need the pressure. It's not necessarily going to come from the front four. Front four's just got to clog the middle. Put a halt on the rushing game for Georgia. If you can get pressure on Stetson Bennett, go back and look at him on tape for these last few games, how quiet his feet is, or how quiet his feet are. And he just pans through his progressions, real quiet, head on a swivel, feet very, very quiet, and he's going to let it rip from the pocket. If you can make him flush and throw on the run, he will make a mistake. He will put a ball where Tennessee secondary or linebackers can get their hands on it. Can we get that pressure? We haven't seen as many nickel blitzes or those star blitzes because we haven't seen as much Sean Schamberger. This will be his first game back. Do we see that back into the mix? Can the linebackers, divvy up some nice packages and get some confusion going into that inexperienced offensive front for Georgia? They're still incredible athletes and going to be potential draft picks in the NFL, but some inexperience there. Can you test them? Can you confuse them with some stunts up front? If you get Stetson Bennett moving, that's going to be a huge key for Tennessee to create turnovers and win that battle.
Yep. The defensive front and the secondary has to play in unison, and they kind of have to bail each other out, in my opinion.
Can you get some coverage sacks?
Exactly.
Get some coverage sacks.
Yep. And on the flip side of that, don't allow Tennessee's secondary, Bryce Thompson, Alante Taylor, whoever is matched up with George Pickens, don't let him be in coverage with George Pickens for 4 or 5 seconds. That is asking for failure. So Tennessee's defense really needs to work in unison. We talk about it, got to find a way to play more physical football up front along the defensive line. Secondary has to be more crisp against Georgia, and I think they will, just with them being able to be in their starting secondary that they envisioned on paper before the season started. Bryce Thompson will be at corner. You'll have Jalen McCullough, Trayvon Flowers at safety, Alante Taylor. He's playing good football right now. And then you have Sean Schamberger, an underrated player on this Tennessee defense. In my opinion, he'll be matched up with Kyrus Jackson in the slot, and I think he's capable of making plays and also coming off the edge, as you mentioned, and potentially getting a sack on the quarterback. Something he did well last year and something Tennessee has been lacking this season. I know Danico Slaughter got home in the opener against South Carolina, but we haven't seen enough corner blitzes or DB blitzes, in my opinion. So I imagine we'll see that and trying to confuse Stetson Bennett, as you alluded to as well, Brad. The last concern with Tennessee's defense that I have going into this game is Tennessee's linebackers matched up with Georgia's tight ends in coverage. It looks like they are going to get Florida State grad transfer Trey McKitty back into the fold. He has missed the last month or so due to a knee injury, but looks like he is going to be able to play this weekend. He is 6'5", but then you look at John Fitzpatrick. He is 6'7", 254 pounds. Darnell Washington, 6'7", 260 pounds as well. So will Tennessee's linebackers be able to match up with Georgia's tight ends or even running backs coming out of the backfield? Will they be able to match up in coverage? It is something that they have struggled with through 2 weeks this season. So hopefully they can get that turned around and Quavaris Crouch and Jeremy Banks can play good football next to Henry To'oTo'o. That would go a long ways to a Tennessee win on Saturday. A big, big opportunity for the Volunteers on Saturday. We are thrilled to watch this football game in Athens on CBS in prime time over the weekend. Rocky Top Insider will be in attendance. Myself will be in attendance. So stay locked in to Rocky Top Insider on RockyTopInsider.com. You can find us at Rocky Top Insider on all of the social media platforms. You can follow me on Ben McKee 14 on Twitter. You can follow Brad Matthews at 865 Brad Matthews on Twitter. And you can tune in on Friday for our predictions for the game. And again, we will be in attendance over the weekend, and stay locked into Rocky Top Insider for all of your Tennessee, Georgia coverage. And we will be back on Sunday or Monday to recap the game. So for Brad Matthews, I am Ben McKee. Enjoy your football viewing pleasures over the weekend. Until next time, we'll talk to y'all later.